Have you ever noticed that there are people who pray, but it feels like heaven is closed? Nothing changes. No answer. Silence. But the Bible reveals a disturbing pattern. Before the greatest falls comes the silence of God, because the person has entered a state where they can no longer perceive the signs, and almost no one understands this. Because the silence of God does not begin in heaven. It begins inside the mind, inside the small decisions ignored daily. Today you will discover the 7 codes of God's silence, invisible patterns that come before confusion, emptiness, destruction, and loss of direction. Mental codes, spiritual, behavioral. Because the problem is not God's silence. The problem is when the person's conscience also begins to fall silent. Code 1. Excessive noise. Elijah on Mount Horeb, 1 Kings 19. God did not appear in the strong wind, nor in the fire. The voice came afterward, in the silence. Decoding. The first stage of spiritual disconnection almost never looks like sin. It looks like distraction. The mind stays overstimulated all the time, thinks all the time, but never listens to themselves. And here is the invisible pattern. Whoever lives too busy loses perception. Application. Perhaps your confusion is not a lack of direction. Perhaps it is excessive noise. Because a noisy mind cannot perceive internal warnings. Great falls begin silently. Code 2. Progressive numbness. Samson and Delilah, Judges 16. Samson lost his strength before realizing he was already weak. That is the frightening detail. The fall began long before the defeat. Decoding. Every repetition weakens awareness. At first, the mistake bothers you. Later, it stops bothering you. The person makes small compromises until it becomes a pattern, and the pattern creates blindness because no one notices their own fall while it is still small. Application. Perhaps the greatest danger is not one big mistake, but silent habits that are weakening your perception every day. Procrastination, excesses, emotional instability. Code 3. Invisible pride. The fall of King Saul, 1 Samuel 15. Saul began humble, but he lost direction when he stopped listening to correction. Decoding. Pride rarely appears as obvious arrogance. Sometimes it appears as silent resistance. I already know, I am right. Growth requires adjustment. But proud people turn correction into an attack. Application. Many people are not lost because of a lack of opportunity. They are lost because they have unlearned how to listen. The problem is not lack of intelligence. It is excess certainty. Code 4. Distractions that drain the soul. Martha and Mary, Luke 10. Martha was busy, but emotionally disconnected. Decoding. There is a difference between movement and direction. Nowadays, distraction is a lifestyle. Everything captures attention. Everything demands an immediate response. But a fast-paced life is not always a conscious life. And this is where the silence begins, when the soul loses depth. Application. Perhaps you are not just tired. Perhaps you are emotionally drained by excessive distraction. Because a constantly stimulated mind loses the ability to feel clarity. Code 5. The false sense of presence. The Church of Laodicea, Revelation 3. They believed they were fine, strong, rich. But the message was frightening. You do not realize that you are blind. Decoding. There comes a moment when the soul begins to operate on autopilot, but internally, it has lost depth. Everything becomes routine. Spiritual awareness falls asleep. And the most dangerous part? The person believes everything is normal. Application. Perhaps the problem is not lack of strength. Perhaps it is emotional numbness. Many people do not realize they are drifting away because the fall happens gradually, in small, daily disconnections. And when they finally notice the emptiness, the silence has already advanced. Code 6. Disconnection from purpose. Jonah fleeing from Nineveh. Jonah 1. Jonah did not lose direction overnight. First came the inner escape, then the confusion, then the storm. Before the external chaos, there was already disconnection within. Decoding. When a person moves away from their purpose, they slowly begin to lose clarity. Motivation weakens. Everything feels empty. So they try to fill it with movement. But the emptiness remains. Because the mind can ignore purpose for a while, but it cannot escape the consequences of that disconnection. Application. Perhaps your exhaustion is not only physical. Perhaps it is the weight of living far from what your conscience knows you should be building. And the most dangerous part, emptiness rarely arrives making noise. It arrives silently. Code 7. The final silence. Judas before the betrayal. The most frightening thing about Judas is that the collapse was already happening inside him long before the betrayal took place. Decoding. Every deep destruction begins invisibly. First awareness weakens, then perception disappears, then emptiness takes control, and when the fall finally appears, people believe it happened suddenly. Application. The silence you feel today is not abandonment, it is a warning. Because the problem was never what is happening outside, it is what is being ignored inside. Now the question is, which of these codes is already operating silently in your life? If this video opened your perception, subscribe to the channel. Because there are other hidden codes in the Bible that still control human behavior to this day, and almost no one notices. 7 minutes of wisdom, a lifetime of results. This was today's code. Ancient code. What has always been there, but almost no one noticed.